So now we're going to look at the urinary system, which has many functions. The major function is to cleanse the blood. The kidneys are the major excretory organ, meaning gets rid of whatever is not needed in our blood or fluid. And it maintains the body's internal environment by doing a number of things. Some we've seen before, some we haven't, and we will this chapter, and some we'll see next chapter, like regulating total water volume and total solute in the water. We'll see that this chapter. Regulating ion concentrations in our extracellular fluids. We'll see that this chapter. Ensuring long-term acid-base balance. That'll be next chapter, number 26. Excreting metabolic wastes, toxins, drugs, basically getting rid of what's not wanted in the body, which we'll see in this chapter. In the past, chapter 16, we've seen that the kidneys produce erythropoietin to regulate our red blood cell production, and renin to regulate blood pressure. Kidney activates vitamin D, which we've seen, and we've seen that it carries out gluconeogenesis, last chapter, during prolonged fasting. So here's the organs of the urinary system. Of course, the main ones are the kidneys, where the urine is produced. The kidneys are connected to the urinary bladder through these long tubes that are called ureters, and the ureters are going to transport the urine from the kidney to the urinary bladder, both on the left and on the right. Urine then is stored in the urinary bladder, which can hold large amounts of fluid or urine until you're ready or till it's convenient to release the urine out of the body, and that final tube that transports the urine out of the body from the urinary bladder is the urethra. So here is a section, a transverse section, plane through the body that's dissecting the kidneys right here. So here's one kidney on the left, kidney on the right. This is anterior, that's posterior. And we can see some important points right here. One is that the kidneys are retroperitoneal, meaning the kidneys are located behind the peritoneum. Remember, the peritoneum is that serous membrane that surrounds many abdominal pelvic cavity organs, not the kidneys. They're behind the peritoneum, or retroperitoneum. They're also located a little higher up than most people think. They're in the superior part of the lumbar region. Remember our chapter 1, abdominal pelvic regions. Then we have supportive tissue surrounding the kidney. And these are the three types of supportive tissue. One is the renal fascia, and that anchors the kidney to the walls. It's made of dense fibrous connective tissue, and we can see that renal fascia on the anterior side and on the posterior side. And that's just supporting the kidneys, allowing them to maintain their location in the superior lumbar region. There's also peritoneal or perirenal, which means around the kidneys, a perirenal fat capsule. And you can see that adipose tissue surrounding the kidneys. And that's important to cushion the kidneys. There's a blow, if you have a blow to the back, that can affect the kidneys, but at least there's a little bit of protection here from that perirenal fat capsule. And we have a fibrous capsule, which you can't really see. It's labeled right there. It's on the kidney itself. It's transparent, and it just prevents infections. So if an infection is in your body, in your abdominal cavity, has a difficult time entering the kidney because of that extra capsule, which we call the fibrous capsule, preventing the spread of infection to the kidney. So the upper parts of your kidneys, both of them, are protected by your rib cage and that perirenal fat that we saw on the previous slide. But the lower parts of the kidney, the bottom half of the kidneys, are susceptible to blunt trauma, especially the right kidney, which is slightly lower. So if we look at the two kidneys, we see the right one's lower than the left, and that's because we have a large liver on the right side of our body, and that which is occupying that space, pushing the kidney down further on the right side. So falls, motor vehicle accidents, contact sports, especially football, can injure the kidney, especially the right kidney, because its lack of protection. That renal artery that leads into the kidney, both kidneys, are especially vulnerable in an injury. Car crashes, for example. They're prone to tearing, which are lacerations, and they're prone to clots forming in there as well, which we call thrombosis. So if there is an impact injury to the kidney, a sign of that would be blood in the urine, which is hematuria. Hematos, blood. Uria is a urine condition. Of course, some of these conditions would require some surgical intervention. And if we look at the internal part of the kidney, this is still gross anatomy, so this is still visible without any magnification here. A section was taken, so we're looking at the interior, and we can see the kidney has three main regions: the cortex, which is this outer shell that looks very granular to the eye. Then you have the medulla, which is the deep to the cortex, and the renal medulla is made up of all of these pyramids, and we can see about seven of them right here. And the pyramids appear striped or striated here because of all the collecting ducts, and which we'll get to later that we'll learn about. And these medullary pyramids, also called renal pyramids, are divided by renal columns. So here's a renal column. There's another renal column there. Renal columns are these inward extensions of the cortex, separating the pyramids of the medulla. Then we have this funnel-shaped area right here, which is called the renal pelvis. And the renal pelvis will deliver the urine into the ureter, which of course leads to the urinary bladder. So if we were to follow the flow of urine, the urine is formed in these renal pyramids or medullary pyramids, and that urine will flow into the minor calyx. So there's many minor calyces. That's sort of not part of the pyramid, but in between the renal columns are the minor calyces, and they'll all kind of join up with each other in these, what we call the major calyx or major calyces. Major calyces will come together to form the renal pelvis, so urine will then flow into the renal pelvis and then into the ureter, and so on. If we follow the blood supply in the kidney is served by the renal artery, which is a main branch from the aorta. And then, not too concerned with the names of all of these until we get to this box, but yeah, the renal artery will split up into smaller branches, segmental artery into an interlobal artery, into an arcuate artery, and then these tiny ones in the cortex called cortical radiate arteries, but that's fine. But then we get to the microscopic portion. That's where we're going to start on the next video. But the important part here is that there are two capillary beds in the kidneys. We have a glomerulus, which is capillaries, and then we have a peritubular capillary bed. So we have peritubular capillaries or vasorecta. These are two different capillary beds, but it's one or the other, depending on where we are in the kidneys. Your glomerulus is served by an arteriole, afferent or afferent arteriole, and is drained by an arteriole, an efferent or efferent arteriole. So this is unique because typically you have an arteriole going into a capillary bed and a venule leading out. But this glomerulus is special, and we'll see that on the next slide because it's served and drained by an arteriole. So that efferent arteriole will lead to a peritubular capillary bed or a vasorecta, one or the other, and then we can see capillaries join up with each other to form small veins, and then they come together to form larger veins, and this is just the opposite of we went through when we named the arteries on this side until we get to the renal vein and finally to the inferior vena cava and back to the heart.